The shotgun gauge system stops at 10. Anything bigger is generally classified as a cannon. So why did Soviet engineers intentionally build a police weapon chambered in a monstrous 4-gauge, born from a rejected anti-aircraft barrel? Forget everything you think you know about standard close-quarters firepower. You are currently looking at the embodiment of Soviet over-engineering and pragmatic repurposing, the KS-23, or Karabin Spesialny, Special Carbine, and it is not subtle. It is the kind of weapon that makes a standard 12-gauge look like a child's toy, an almost cartoonishly oversized implement of state control. When the Russians need something done, they don't use scalpels, they use sledgehammers. This is the sledgehammer. We are handling a piece of history that weighs in like a medium machine gun, but fires ammunition that is, frankly, psychotic. The standard American 12-gauge shell has an internal diameter of 5 millimeters. The KS-23, designated as a 4-gauge, boasts a 23 millimeter bore diameter, a jump in size that translates directly into utterly absurd kinetic energy. For comparison, a robust 12-gauge slug might weigh around 437 grains. The slugs we are testing today are custom-loaded behemoths, weighing in at 1,000 grains, more than double the mass, and we are pushing them out at roughly 1,000 feet per second. Someone is already calculating that staggering foot-pound number, and trust me, it's not a number associated with civilian shotguns. The ammunition itself is a saga. Since importing official Russian 4-gauge shells, especially the specialized rounds, is essentially impossible given the current geopolitical climate, we rely on meticulously hand-loaded shells. The genuine article often utilizes a combination of metal and plastic construction, varying greatly depending on the round's purpose, be it solid slug, tear gas deployment, or explosive flashbang. But even with these custom, albeit slightly sketchy, rounds, the underlying power dynamic is undeniable. The immediate question, the one you truly need answered, is what does firing this actually feel like? Let's take the 1,000-grain slug, the pure, unadulterated fist of kinetic impact. Settling the wire stock against the shoulder and pulling the trigger result in a violent, immediate concussion that shocks the system. That was profoundly spicy. Having fired everything from 50 BMG to heavy artillery, that recoil impulse is unlike any pump-action shoulder-fired weapon I have ever handled. It's less of a push and more of a brutal, focused punch, confirming the reputation this weapon has earned in titles like Escape from Tarkov. To truly appreciate the absurdity, we must compare it, switching immediately to a standard, albeit robust, 12-gauge shotgun. The difference is laughable. The 12-gauge, normally a serious piece of hardware, feels like a manageable, low-recoil practice weapon in direct contrast. This immediate comparison underscores why the KS-23 exists on its own ballistic plane. Now that we have satisfied the need for immediate ballistic shock, let's explore the engineering oddity. The KS-23's existence is a glorious result of Soviet waste reduction. Its design closely mirrors the venerable American Winchester Model 1300, a reliable, rotating bolt pump-action system, but scaled up to insane proportions. The story begins not on a drawing board for police weaponry, but at the anti-aircraft factory. The KS-23 is literally a child of the 23mm VY-23 anti-aircraft cannon. During the manufacturing process of these high-pressure precision barrels, numerous pieces were rejected, known as blemishes, because they didn't meet the extremely tight tolerances required to safely fire high-velocity 23 by 152mm rounds, which operate at tremendous pressures. If you look down the bore of this KS-23, you can sometimes see the physical evidence. The barrel wall might not be perfectly concentric, thinning dangerously in spots for a high-pressure 23mm round. The Soviets, ever pragmatic, thought, why scrap perfectly good steel tubing? Why not turn those blem 23mm barrels into a lower-pressure police and riot control shotgun? Thus, the KS-23 was born. Because the base material was designed for a high-velocity cannon, the barrels are inherently stronger than required for conventional shotgun pressures. Crucially, these barrels are rifled. While unusual for a close-range security shotgun, this legacy feature stems directly from their anti-aircraft heritage. The combination of rejected parts, a ridiculously oversized gauge, and crude but reliable functionality screams Russian. The operational role of the KS-23 is not of a standard door breacher. It was developed in the 1970s primarily for the Ministry of Internal Affairs, MVD, and prison guards. Its primary utility was crowd dispersion, perimeter denial, and this is achieved through a variety of unique 4-gauge ammunition that largely mirrors the utility of less lethal grenade launchers used by Western police forces. Let's look at the ammunition doctrine that defines this weapon's versatility. While the lethal slugs and heavy buckshot are terrifying, the KS-23 is famous for its specialized non-lethal and less lethal rounds. These include the Strela 3 Arrow rubber shot, the notorious Cheremuka 7 bird cherry tear gas round, and the Lilac or Siren flashbang or concussion rounds. The objective was to fill a large area, like a prison yard or a plaza, with incapacitating agents or overwhelming noise and force, without necessarily resorting to deadly force unless required. But since we are here to test pure kinetic impact, we turn to the ballistic gel testing, featuring our free-range bodybuilder dummy. We are loading up the 3 main flavors of kinetic mayhem. First, the 1,000 grain slug, 1,000 feet per second. The shot rings out, and the impact is immediate and devastating. That projectile traveled straight through the torso block and the spine substitute. Most shotgun slugs, even powerful 3-inch magnums, usually stop or severely deform inside dense ballistic gel. This 4-gauge slug possessed so much initial energy and mass that it simply tunneled through, retaining lethal energy far beyond the intended target. It is a clean through-and-through shot, leaving a devastating wound channel. Next, the buckshot. We are using number 4 buckshot, a relatively small diameter pellet, but the sheer volume is unprecedented. A standard 12-gauge shell might hold 8 to 9 pellets of 00 buck. This 4-gauge hull, filled to the brim, contains a preposterous amount of number 4. While this hand-loaded shell didn't feel as robust in terms of recoil, indicating a possible slight underloading compared to the slug, the dispersion pattern and sheer density would still be instantly incapacitating. You simply cannot survive being hit by that much lead. Then came the absurd experimentation, the 12-gauge inside a 4-gauge test, often requested by viewers who appreciate the lunacy of firearms experimentation. We tried to fire a 12-gauge shell nested inside the 4-gauge hull. The result? A dramatic failure to detonate the 12-gauge primer, though the powder in the larger shell did ignite, separating the projectile assembly. The high-speed camera footage confirms the chaotic forces at play, demonstrating that sometimes brute force does not equal scientific efficacy. Reverting to pure power, we took another 1,000-grain slug to a steel target. The resulting deformation and energy transfer are deafening. It hits with the sound and force of a small 40mm grenade launcher. That mass, traveling at that speed, turns steel into putty, and reminds you that even if this weapon was repurposed from scrap, the end result is a supremely powerful, lethal tool. Let's step away from the firing line and appreciate the mechanism itself. The sheer size of the bore is the first thing that grabs you. It is vast, a dark maw ready to consume anything you feed it. The KS-23 operates with dual action bars, a feature adopted from the Winchester 1300, a standard for modern reliability that prevents binding when cycling. The action is remarkably smooth, though the tight tolerances and the slightly non-standard ammunition we are using mean it gets dirty quickly. If you look at the ejection port, it is absolutely enormous. It needs to be large to cycle these immense 4-gauge holes. Holding a standard 12-gauge shell next to the KS-23's ejection port provides the clearest visual aid. The 12-gauge looks like a thin cartridge designed for target practice. The 4-gauge shell is a short, stubby industrial cannon round. It looks less like a modern firearm and more like something pulled straight out of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. In terms of ergonomics, the KS-23 is brutally functional. The handguard we are using is a reproduction, though faithful to the original, designed for a strong, comfortable grip necessary to manage the immense recoil. The controls are simple: a robust, reliable cross-bolt safety, standard for many pump actions, and the standard action release lever situated forward of the trigger guard. The trigger pull is typically heavy, roughly 6 pounds, in keeping with its military and security role. The stock configuration is another quirk. While some versions feature a standard solid buttstock, the one we have utilizes a wire stock, which, while tactical, does nothing to absorb the punishing recoil. Interestingly, it is often seen paired with a modified AK-74 grenade-launching butt pad, presumably because the standard Russian soldier is expected to absorb this impact simply through sheer will and perhaps high quantities of vodka. The versatility of the ammunition system is the KS-23's core strength. While we focused on the devastating lethal rounds, the true genius lies in its capacity to instantly switch between anti-personnel buckshot, hard rubber impact rounds, perimeter denial tear gas, and blinding flashbangs. This makes it a highly effective, if blunt, instrument for internal security operations, occupying a niche between traditional shotguns and specialized crew-served weaponry. In the right hands, it is a pacifier. In the wrong hands, it is horrifically overpowered. The question of its practical application today is complex. While it remains a rare and specialized tool, primarily confined to Russian and select former Soviet state police and security forces, its sheer power guarantees that if you are struck by a lethal 4-gauge round, the threat is definitively neutralized. As a dedicated lethal shotgun, there is almost nothing in the world that rivals its energy transfer capabilities. This has been one of the most unique and honestly punishing weapons we have ever brought to the range. The KS-23 is not just a shotgun, it is a statement about Soviet engineering priorities. If it needs to work, make it massive, make it strong, and if you can reuse an anti-aircraft barrel in the process, so much the better. But even the most powerful, oversized weapon is useless without the skills to operate it under stress. Training is the single most crucial factor in effective weapon handling. Go get training from the professionals. Next time, we are diving deep into a weapon that achieved fame through its infamous political role, a piece of Cold War espionage history that makes the KS-23 look like a children's toy in terms of complexity and clandestine operation. You won't believe the story behind the silent assassin that changed the rules of engagement forever. Make sure you don't miss the history behind the most consequential assassination tool of the 20th century.